The Vrellan Empire hadn't just conquered worlds. They had perfected it. 47 star systems in 3 years. And every single battle followed the same script. Jump into the system with an overwhelming fleet, demand immediate surrender, and watch the local species crumble. Most surrendered before a single shot was fired. The few who resisted lasted maybe a day or two before their leaders came crawling with white flags. Admiral Cathus stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the stars blur past through the massive viewport. His 6 eyes tracked the tactical hologram floating before him, showing the next target system, Arcturus, human space. He'd read the preliminary reports during the jump, and honestly, he was disappointed. This would be another easy victory to add to his list. His tactical officer, a young Vrellan named Swordhas, approached with a data tablet. Admiral, the intelligence briefing on the humans is complete. Cathus took the tablet, without looking at him. Summarize it. Primitive, sir. Very primitive. They only achieved faster-than-light travel about 60 years ago. Their governments are fragmented into something they call nation-states. They still argue among themselves constantly. Military technology is laughable. Chemical rockets, projectile weapons, and some basic energy shields. The reports estimate their most advanced warship is equivalent to our vessels from 2 centuries ago. Cathus handed the tablet back. So we're wasting our time. It appears so, Admiral, though the system does have valuable mining operations and 3 habitable worlds. The conquest will be profitable. The Armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Arcturus system. 300 warships, the largest assault force the Vrellan had deployed in over a year. Against humans, it was complete overkill. But that was the point. The Vrellan way was to make resistance seem so hopeless that the enemy gave up before the fighting even started. Sensors immediately lit up with activity. The human colonies had detected them. Communication channels flooded with panic transmissions. Civilian ships were launching from the planets, running for the outer system. Some military vessels were moving too, but not toward the Vrellan fleet. They were escorting the evacuees. They're running already, Sorta said with satisfaction. Shall I prepare the surrender terms? Not yet. Let them panic a bit more. Fear makes them more cooperative. Cathus had given this speech dozens of times. Conquered species remembered it better when they were terrified first. But then something appeared on the tactical display that made him pause. A single red, positioned directly between the Vrellan Armada and the inner system. One ship, alone. What is that? Cathus asked. Sordas manipulated the hologram. Zooming in. A destroyer-class vessel, sir. Designation defiant. It's just sitting there in our direct path. Cathus stared at the lone ship. It was tiny compared to his dreadnoughts. One of his capital ships could probably destroy it with a single volley. Are they malfunctioning? Engine failure. No, sir. Their reactor is running hot. Weapons are powered. They're deliberately blocking our advance vector. Hail them. I want to speak with their commander. The communications officer worked his console for a moment, then looked up confused. Sir, they're not responding. The channel is open. They're receiving our signals, but they're sending nothing back. Not even acknowledgement. Cathus felt his mandibles twitch with irritation. In all his conquests, no one had ever simply ignored him. They begged, they threatened, they negotiated, but they always responded. Identify the commander. One moment. Sordas pulled up the data. Captain Hyun. That's all we have. The human databases are encrypted better than we anticipated. A female captain, commanding a single destroyer, facing down 300 warships. Either she was insane or suicidal. Probably both. One ship, Cathus said slowly. One primitive ship thinks it can stop the entire Vrellan Armada. Around the command deck, his officers laughed. It was absurd. Ridiculous. Cathus didn't laugh. Something about this felt wrong. Every species had its warriors, its heroes who made final stands. But they always talked first, gave speeches, made demands. This human captain was doing nothing, just sitting there in the void, waiting. Sir, your orders? Sordes asked. Cathis made his decision. Fire a warning salvo. Target the space around them, not the ship itself. Let's show them what they're facing. They'll break. The Eternal Dominion's main batteries charged, humming with power that could crack a moon in half. Dozens of other ships in the formation did the same. The void between the fleets lit up with energy. Plasma bolts and particle beams screamed across the darkness, brilliant and terrible. They formed a cage of light around the Defiant, close enough that the human crew must have felt the radiation wash over their shields. The display was beautiful and horrifying, a demonstration of power that had made countless species surrender immediately. The light show lasted exactly 30 seconds, carefully calculated to terrify, but not destroy. When the weapon stopped firing and the energy dissipated, Cathis looked at his tactical display, expecting to see the human ship's shields down, maybe some damage, definitely a surrender signal incoming. Instead, he saw nothing. The Defiant had completely vanished from sensors. Where did it go? Cathis demanded. Sordes was frantically working his console. I don't know, sir. It was there, and then it just disappeared. No explosion, no debris, no energy signature. It's just gone. 300 Vrellan warships searched their sensors. One human destroyer had simply vanished into empty space. And Admiral Cathis felt something he hadn't experienced in years of conquest. A cold thread of doubt. Where is it? Cathis demanded, his voice sharp enough to cut through the sudden chaos on the command deck. Sordes was bent over his console, all 6 of his eyes focused on the tactical display. His claws tapped frantically across the controls. Unknown Admiral. All sensors show empty space. No debris field, no energy signature, no residual heat. It's like the ship never existed. That's impossible. Ships don't just disappear. Cathis moved closer to hologram, watching his officers scramble to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. A ship that size couldn't vanish. Physics didn't work that way. Maybe we vaporized it completely? Suggested one of the weapons officers. The bombardment was intense. Then where's the debris? Sordes countered. Even total destruction leaves particles, radiation, something for sensors to detect. This is... The tactical alarm shrieked. The Defiant had reappeared, not ahead of them where it had been, 3,000 kilometers off their port flank, right in the middle of the formation. Battle stations. Cathis roared, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were too slow. The communications officer suddenly straightened. Sir, incoming transmission on all frequencies. Captain Hyun broadcasting. A woman's voice filled the command deck. Calm, cold, human. You wanted our answer. Here it is. The Defiant opened fire. But these weren't normal weapons. The missiles didn't streak toward the hulls of the nearest ships. Instead, they curved in flight, tracking toward specific external systems. One struck the sensor array of a nearby cruiser. Another hit a communication relay. A third took out the long-range scanner of a dreadnought. Within seconds, 3 Vrellan cruisers went completely dark. Their running lights died. Their shields flickered and failed. They were still there, still intact, but blind and deaf. Unable to see, unable to communicate, unable to fight. Return fire. Cathis ordered. All ships, target that destroyer. Energy beams lanced across the void. Dozens of Vrellan warships turned their weapons on a single human vessel. The firepower was enough to crack a planet, but the Defiant was already gone. It reappeared 5,000 kilometers away, behind their rear formation. Somehow it had moved across that distance in the time it took Cathis to blink. How? Sordes was no longer just confused. He was afraid. Cathis could hear it in his voice. How are they moving like that? Human ships can't possibly have that kind of speed. Our intelligence reports. Your intelligence reports are clearly wrong. Cathis snapped. The Defiant fired again. More missiles, more precision strikes. A Vrellan dreadnought suddenly lurched as its maneuvering thrusters died. Another ship's reactor began to overheat. Coolant systems compromised by a direct hit to the external cooling vents. Admiral, it's not trying to destroy us, Sordes said, realization dawning in his voice. It's crippling us. making our own ships into obstacles. He was right. The disabled cruisers were now drifting into the formation, forcing other ships to maneuver around them. The dreadnought with a damaged reactor was evacuating, its escape pod scattering like seeds, creating a hazard zone that nobody could fire through without hitting their own people. "They're targeting our formation integrity," the tactical officer reported. "Every strike is calculated to maximize disruption. We're starting to collide with each other." Cathus watched his perfect formation dissolve into chaos. Ships breaking away to avoid disabled vessels. Communication channels clogged with damage reports and panic requests for orders. 3 centuries of Rellan military doctrine had never prepared them for an enemy that fought like this. Captain Hyun's voice crackled across all channels again, not just the Eternal Dominion, but broadcasting to every single Vrellan ship in the fleet. "To all Vrellan forces, this is your only warning. Leave now or learn why humans don't fight fair." Cathus pulled up the visual feed of the Defiant. The destroyer was burning now. Actual flames vented from hull breaches. Atmosphere trailed behind it like a comet's tail. Parts of its armor were melted slag. It had taken heavy damage from a Vrellan counterfire, but it wasn't retreating. "Why isn't she running?" Sordes asked quietly. "Her ship is dying." That was the question, wasn't it? Any rational commander would withdraw. The Defiant had done its job, proved it could hurt them. Honor was satisfied. There was no shame in retreat when facing impossible odds. But Captain Hyun wasn't retreating. The destroyer came about, its damaged engines flaring. It fired another salvo, taking out the shield generator of a Vrellan battleship. Then it dove through the fleet formation, weapons blazing, trailing fire and atmosphere like a wounded animal that refused to die. "She's still fighting," Cathus said, more to himself than anyone else. "Admiral, your orders?" Cathus stared at the burning human ship on his display. In 3 years of conquest, across 47 star systems, he'd never seen anything like this. Species fought until the odds were clearly against them, then surrendered. It was logical. It was rational. It was how civilized beings conducted warfare. But there was nothing logical about what he was watching. The Defiant was a dead ship fighting. Its crew had to know they couldn't win. 1 destroyer against 300 warships. Simple mathematics. Simple reality. Yet they kept fighting. And for the first time in his long military career, Admiral Cathus felt something completely foreign. Uncertainty. Not about whether he could destroy the human ship. He could, eventually. But uncertainty about what it meant that they wouldn't stop. What kind of species fights when victory is impossible? What kind of species keeps attacking while their ship burns around them? "Get me fleet tactical," Cathus ordered. "I want kill solutions on that destroyer. Now." But even as he gave the order, he couldn't shake the cold feeling spreading through his chest. This wasn't going to be like the other 47 conquests. This was going to be something else entirely. 3 days. That's how long it took for Admiral Cathus to realize he'd made a catastrophic mistake. The Defiant was still out there, somehow, barely functional, held together by whatever emergency systems the humans had left. It drifted to the battlefield like a ghost, occasionally firing a missile or 2 before disappearing again into the debris field it had helped create. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was that the Defiant had never been alone. "Admiral, sensors are detecting new contacts," Sordes called out, his voice tight with tension. "Multiple faster-than-light signatures. They're everywhere." Cathus moved to the tactical display and felt his blood run cold. Human warships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel from 17 different directions, not from one rallying point like a proper fleet. They came from everywhere at once. Destroyers from the galactic north, cruisers from the east, even what looked like retrofitted civilian cargo haulers, bristling with weapons that had been welded to their hulls in obvious desperation. "How many?" Cathus asked. "Still counting, sir. At least 80 vessels so far." "No, 90. Wait," more contact appearing. Sordes looked up from his console. "They're not stopping, Admiral. They keep coming." The human ships didn't form up into a proper battle formation. They just kept coming, each one taking a different approach vector, different speed, different altitude relative to the system's orbital plane. It was chaos, complete disorder. Cathus intercepted their communications, expecting to hear a unified command structure issuing orders. Instead, he heard arguments. Taejun here, I'm taking the left flank. Negative, Taejun, that's too exposed. You'll get torn apart. Then cover me, Gwangju. I'm going anyway. Command, this is Olsen. We don't have enough fuel for a prolonged engagement. Then make it quick and hit them hard. Admiral, they're not following orders, Sorta said, bewildered. Their commanders are arguing with each other. In real time, during a battle. But even as he said it, the human ships moved with disturbing effectiveness. The destroyer that had argued about taking the left flank did exactly that, drawing fire from 3 Vrellan cruisers. Then the ships that had promised to cover it appeared from above and below, catching the Vrellan vessels in a crossfire. They're not following Central Command, the tactical officer said slowly, realization dawning. Each ship is independent. Each captain is making their own decisions. They're coordinating through communication and trust, not orders. It shouldn't work. Military doctrine across the entire galaxy agreed on this. Centralized command was essential. Without it, forces became disorganized and ineffective. Yet somehow, these humans were making it work. A human frigate, call sign Taejun, broke from the swarm and accelerated directly toward a Vrellan carrier. The carrier's point-of-defense systems opened up, tearing chunks out of frigate's hull. Alarms must have been screaming on that ship. Its crew must have known. They were seconds from death. Escape pods began ejecting from the Taejun, dozens of them, scattering into space like dandelion seeds. Then the now-empty frigate, piloted by what had to be a skeleton crew, or maybe just automation, slammed directly into the carrier's engine section at a significant fraction of light speed. The explosion lit up the tactical display like a small sun. They evacuated the crew and used the ship as a missile, Cathus said, his voice hollow. They sacrificed it deliberately. Sir, another vessel approaching our damaged dreadnought, Weapons Control reported. It's deploying mines, nuclear warheads, right into the debris field. Cathus watched as a human ship, designated Soul's Hammer, scattered dozens of nuclear devices throughout the wreckage of previous engagements. Any Vrellan ship that tried to maneuver through that area would trigger a chain reaction. They'd turn the battlefield itself into a weapon. Admiral, human casualties are at 40%, Sortas reported. 40%, sir. They should be breaking by now. Every military force in the galaxy broke at 30% casualties. It was a universal constant. When a fleet lost a third of its strength, morale collapsed. Crews mutinied or retreated. Commanders sued for peace. But the humans kept coming. More ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. A damaged cruiser that could barely fly still fired as weapons. A destroyer with half its hull missing continued to fight. Even the civilian vessels, clearly not designed for combat, threw themselves into the battle with reckless abandon. Signal retreat vector, Cathus ordered. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. We're withdrawing to regroup. Sir, we can't, the communications officer said. They're jamming our long-range communications. Fleet coordination is impossible. Each ship group will have to retreat independently. That's when Cathus understood. The humans had been watching, learning, adapting. In just 3 days, they'd analyzed every Vrellan tactic, every formation, every communication protocol. They'd figured out how to jam specific frequencies, how to predict Vrellan movements, how to turn the Vrellan's own doctrine against them. On his tactical display, the Defiant was still there, still fighting. The ship should have been destroyed twice over by now. Parts of it were literally missing. But Captain Hyun kept her vessel in the fight through nothing but force fields, emergency patches, and what had to be sheer stubborn will. A transmission came through. Captain Hyun's voice, transmitted on open channels for everyone to hear. All human vessels, this is Hyun. The Vrellan are attempting to retreat. Don't let them reform. Stay close. Make them pay for every meter. The human ship surged forward like a pack of wolves sensing wounded prey. Kathis finally understood the terrible truth. Humanity wasn't fighting to win, not in the traditional sense. They were fighting to make the cost of victory so high, so bloody, so expensive in ships and lives, that the Vrelin would never want to come back. And it was working. Lieutenant Salmon stared at her console through the smoke, filling the bridge of the Defiant. Every number on her screen was red. Every single one. Hull integrity had dropped to 23%. 3 more breaches, and they'd lose pressure in the forward sections entirely. Life support was cycling on emergency power, barely keeping the air breathable. The crew roster showed half their people either dead or too injured to fight. They'd been in combat for 72 hours straight. "Captain," Salmon called out, her voice hoarse from the smoke. "Incoming transmission. It's Admiral Kathis. He's offering terms." Captain Hyun looked up from the tactical display she'd been studying. Blood ran down the side of her face from a gash on her forehead, where a piece of ceiling had hit her during the last barrage. She hadn't bothered to get it treated. They had bigger problems than one captain's head wound. "Terms?" Hyun asked. "Surrender terms, Captain. He wants to negotiate." Around the bridge, the remaining crew members went still. Weapons Officer Ensign Taeyong stopped working on the missile guidance system. The navigator looked up from trying to coax more power from their dying engines. Even the damage control teams paused in their endless work of patching holes and rerouting systems. Hyun wiped blood from her eye and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. "Open the channel. Let's hear what he has to say." The main screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Kathis on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. He looked tired. His uniform was still perfect, his command deck pristine, but something in his 6 eyes spoke of exhaustion. "Captain Hyun," Kathis began, his translator rendering his words into Korean. "You have fought well, better than any species we've encountered. Your tactics are innovative. Your courage is undeniable. I'm prepared to offer you honorable terms of surrender. You and your crew will be treated as prisoners of war under galactic conventions. Your wounded will receive medical care. Your dead will be honored." He paused, clearly expecting a response. Hyun let the silence stretch. She looked around her broken bridge, looked at Salmon with her burned hands, still working the console, at Taeyong, who had a piece of shrapnel embedded in his shoulder, but refused to leave his post, at young Lieutenant Jaiwoo, who'd been promoted to chief engineer 3 hours ago because everyone above him was dead. "No," Hyun said simply. Kathis blinked all 6 eyes in what might have been confusion. "Captain, perhaps you misunderstand. I'm offering—" "I understand perfectly," Hyun interrupted. "And my answer is no. Your ship is dying. Your people are dying. There's no dishonor in surrender when you fought this hard." Hyun leaned forward, closer to the camera. Blood dripped from her chin onto her uniform. She didn't care. "Admiral, your species doesn't understand something fundamental about humans," she said. "We've been killing each other for 10,000 years. We invented weapons that could crack our own planet open, and we actually used them on ourselves, on our own cities. We fought wars that burned entire continents, wars that killed millions, wars that should have ended us." She could see Kathis' mandibles twitch. "Good. Let him be uncomfortable. You think you can break us?" Hyun continued. "We were already broken. We broke ourselves repeatedly throughout our entire history. And every single time we rebuilt from the ashes. Every single time we came back stronger. That's what humans do. We don't give up. We don't surrender. We certainly don't quit just because the odds are against us." Behind her, Ensign Taeyong had gone back to work. He was loading their last 7 missiles into the tubes. 7 missiles against 300 ships. The math was absurd. "Every human on this ship knows they're probably going to die today," Hyun said. Her voice was steady. "Calm. And we all chose to be here anyway. Nobody forced us. Nobody conscripted us. We volunteered. Because that's what you do when someone threatens your home." Across the fleet, other captains were broadcasting similar messages. Commander Jiho on the Busan. Her cruiser missing its entire port side. Captain Yunji on the Incheon, limping on one engine. Officer Do Hyan on the crippled frigate Gwangju, his ship held together by emergency force fields and luck. They weren't giving speeches. They weren't making grand declarations for the history books. They were simply stating facts, making promises they intended to keep. Admiral Cathis, Hyun said, I'm going to give you one last chance. Take your fleet and leave. Right now. Because if you stay, we're going to show you what humans mean when we talk about acceptable losses. You're outnumbered 50-1, Cathis said quietly. We know. Last chance. Leave, or find out why humans don't fight fair. The transmission cut. Salmon looked at her captain. Orders. Hyun stood, gripping the back of her command chair to stay steady. Signal all remaining ships. Coordinate on my mark. We're going straight through their center formation. Captain, that's suicide. Hyun finished. Probably. Do it anyway. Taeyong looked up from weapons. Missiles ready, Captain. All 7 of them. Any other ships in range of this run? 17, Captain. All of them damaged. Most of them should have retreated already. But they didn't. Signal them. We go together. The Defiant and 17 other damaged human vessels, ships that had no business still fighting, turned toward the heart of the Vrellan formation. Their engines burned hot, pushing past safety limits because safety didn't matter anymore. Their weapons powered up one final time, drawing every last bit of energy from strained reactors. The math said it was impossible. The odds said they'd all be destroyed in seconds. But humans had never cared much about math when their homes were at stake. The Defiant led the charge, trailing atmosphere and fire, a broken ship refusing to die. And behind it came 17 others, just as damaged, just as determined. They weren't trying to win anymore. They were trying to make sure the Vrellan never came back. The Vrellan Empire retreated. The word felt strange even to think. In 3 years of conquest, across 47 star systems, the Vrellan had never retreated from anyone. They had crushed opposition. They had accepted surrender. They had occupied and moved on. But they had never run. Admiral Cathis watched the tactical display as his fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving the Arcturus system behind. The numbers told one story. The Vrellan had lost 30 ships. The humans had lost 87. By pure mathematics, by every conventional measure of military success, the Vrellan had won. But Cathis knew the truth. They hadn't won. They'd barely escaped. If they'd stayed even one more day, the humans would have kept coming. More ships, more attacks, more of that terrifying willingness to die for every meter space. The humans weren't going to stop. Not at 40% casualties. Not at 60. Probably not even at 90. They would have kept fighting until either the Vrellan left or everyone was dead. Both sides. Complete annihilation. What kind of species thinks that's an acceptable outcome? Back in the Arcturus system, the Defiant drifted through debris fields like a ghost. The ship was barely recognizable as a vessel anymore. Whole sections were just gone, vaporized or blown away. The rest looked like melted scrap metal barely held together by emergency force fields. But somehow, impossibly, there were still life signs aboard. Rescue ships swarmed in. Human cruisers that had survived the battle, cargo vessels pressed into emergency service, even a few civilian craft that had stayed at the edge of the system. They surrounded the dying destroyer, extending docking tubes and emergency airlocks. Captain Hyun floated in a medical pod, watching through a viewport as rescue teams worked. They'd pulled her off the bridge 30 minutes ago, when she'd finally collapsed from blood loss. The doctors said she'd be fine after some surgery and rest. She'd told them to treat the critical cases first. A communications officer appeared at her pod with a tablet. Captain, transmission from Earth Command. Priority 1. Hyun took the tablet with shaking hands. The message was brief. All human borders secure. Vrellan fleet in full retreat confirmed. No pursuit detected. Casualties, 40% fleet-wide. You did it, Captain. You held the line. 40%. That number sat in Hyun's chest like a stone. She pulled up the casualty list. It scrolled for a long time. 2,347 names. 2,347 people who'd been alive 4 days ago, who'd had families, dreams, lives waiting for them after their service ended. Commander Miho, who'd rammed the Taejun into that carrier. They recovered his body from an escape pod. He'd stayed behind to pilot the ship on its final run while his crew evacuated. Captain Nari from Seoul's Hammer, gone. Her ship had taken a direct hit to the bridge. Lieutenant Hajun from the Gwangju, Ensign Sujin from the Incheon, dozens more, hundreds more. Lieutenant Salmon appeared at the medical pod, her own hands wrapped in bandages. She'd refused evacuation from the Defiant until every other crew member was accounted for. "Captain," she said quietly, "the crew is asking. They want to know if it was worth it." Hyun looked past Salmon, at the viewport, at the stars beyond. The Arcturus system was still there, still human. The colonies on those 3 planets were still intact. Millions of civilians who had been enslaved or killed were safe. Yes, Hyun said, it was worth it. She believed that. She had to believe that. Because if she didn't, then what had those 2,347 people died for? Weeks later, the Galactic Council convened for an emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the chamber, many of them species who'd surrendered to Vrelin without a fight. The human delegate, Ambassador Kyung, stood before them. The Galactic Council recognizes humanity's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The council leader announced, "Your species has earned its place among the starfaring civilizations through strength of arms and determination." There was no applause, just silence, because everyone in that chamber understood what had really happened. Humanity hadn't been recognized because they'd won some glorious victory. They'd been recognized because they'd shown they would rather burn everything down than submit. They'd proven themselves too dangerous, too unpredictable, too costly to conquer. In a private chamber, Admiral Cathus filed his report to the Vrelin High Command. It was brief. Recommendation: avoid Terran space indefinitely. Humans do not calculate victory like rational species. They calculate it like survivors. They will accept casualties that would break any other species. They will sacrifice their own ships, their own lives without hesitation. They cannot be intimidated because they've already experienced the worst their own kind can do to each other. In 3,000 years of Vrelin expansion, I have never encountered a species like this. They are not warriors. They are not soldiers. They are something more dangerous. They are survivors who refuse to quit. The report was classified immediately, but word spread anyway, through military channels, through diplomatic back channels, through merchants and travelers. Stay away from human space. They're insane. They'll fight you until everyone's dead and call it victory. On Earth, in the Strategic Defense Command, analysts were already running simulations. The Vrelin might have retreated, but they weren't the only threat out there. The galaxy was full of empires, federations, and collectives, some peaceful, many not. General Park reviewed the battle data from Arcturus. "We got lucky," she said to her staff. "The Vrelin didn't understand us. The next enemy might." "Then what do we do?" her aide asked. "We prepare. We build more ships. We train more crews. And we make sure every species in this galaxy knows the same thing the Vrelin learned." "What's that, General?" Park looked at the star map, at the tiny sphere of human-controlled space surrounded by vast empires. "That humanity doesn't fight to win. We fight so that anyone who attacks us regrets it so much they never try again. It wasn't about glory. It wasn't about honor. It wasn't even really about victory. It was about will. And humanities who had been forged in 10,000 years of warfare, suffering, and survival. They'd fought each other with everything from rocks to nuclear weapons. They destroyed their own cities, their own people, their own planet's ecosystem, and somehow survived it all. That history had taught them something the rest of the galaxy didn't understand. You don't conquer worlds just by having better weapons or bigger fleets. You conquer them by breaking the enemy's will to fight. And humanity's will couldn't be broken, because it had already been tested in fires that would have destroyed any other species. The galaxy was about to learn what that meant.